I found this shirt from when I was a kid of the German soccer team.
What does it say below the Germany?
It was the World Cup.
World Cup 94.
I was
Ah,
12,
okay.
and this is 30 years old. But I don't know if how Germany did that year. I don't remember.
Yeah, I have no idea either, but I think they didn't do so well in 94. I think they won in 1990. And in the 2000s, they were somewhere where they were pretty good. But 94, I mean, I was an anti-G. I think when was the unification in 93 or so? Or am I getting that wrong? No, 1990, October.
Oh,
But that also, I didn't really hear about it because it was in the middle of a session, October session, on the third day or so, and I heard it later through the newspaper. So the 90s, they don't really exist in my memory because most of the time I spent in Antalya as a training monk. So I don't really know anything about movies, about music that happened in the 90s, and um, soccer world championships also completely escaped me in the 90s.
that's great.
Yeah, when was it? At the end of the 90s, there was this election in America, and for a time, it wasn't really clear if Bush had won or there was his opponent, some guy with a Greek name. I forgot the Dukakis, I think. Was it Dukakis?
Are you talking about the older George Bush or the younger one?
The younger one. And I think he ran against Dukakis. Is that possible? Or was he
I
running against
remember Al
Dole and
Gore. There was
Dukakis?
a guy named Al Gore, but I don't remember if it was another.
Yeah. Probably Gore and Dukakis. I don't know who was at the top of the team. Probably Gore also. And we had an American visitor at the time. And because of the results in Florida for a couple of weeks, it wasn't clear if Bush had won or Al Gore had won, and he was really worried about it. And I hadn't heard about either of the two. I just said, it doesn't make a difference. Yes, of course it makes a huge difference. I don't know who any of these two guys is. Yeah. So right now you're in America?
Yeah, we did the christening of my sister's baby, and they actually do it in a Russian Orthodox church because her husband is. It was really
I
interesting.
see, I see. Congratulations. Congratulations. Hi, Diane. Always thank you.
Oh, it's good to see you every Monday.
Thank you.
I hope to see you sometime live in Osaka.
Yes, yeah, that would be great.
Trun should join any minute, but if she doesn't come here right at 7, you can start, I think.
Okay, yes. She's still teaching a class until 7, I guess.
No, she's just getting ready.
Oh, okay.
Today, hello, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yeah, okay. UPS wanted to bring something to me to deliver something until 12 o'clock, but they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the second time, so maybe I stand up and go out of the room.
Yes.
Don't wonder about it. Sorry.
Yes. Yes, there's no problem. Don't forget to to mute yourself during the Zen. So
Of
as long
course.
as you're mute, you can do anything. Uh,
Okay.
yeah. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's Monday Zen and Zazen class. Today I will talk about Sawaki Roshi's quotes from To You. But before that, as always, let's sit together for half an hour. So thank you for joining. Today I will talk about Sawaki Roshi's quotes from To You, and we are on page 51, the 8th chapter. The next quote is: "We constantly let ourselves be distracted by details, and in this way we lose sight of the whole. We buy strange things that we don't want at all, in the hope that we just might win something with a lottery ticket the cashier gives us for free." So I don't know if it's the same all over the world, but probably sometimes in supermarkets, if you buy goods for a certain amount of money, then at the cashier you would get something extra, or you win, in this case, a ticket for the lottery. And if you're lucky, then you get some extra prize. Or sometimes in some Japanese stores that sell suits, if you buy one, you get a second suit for free. So people go there so that they can get a second suit, which of course is a nice thing if you need a lot of suits in your daily life. I personally, I never owned a suit in my life. I never needed one. So even if somebody gave me a second suit, I don't even know need the first one. But sometimes we do exactly this. We buy, I don't know, if you buy 2 drinks, you get a third. Actually, you would like to drink only one, but then you order the second drink in the hope for the third one that you get for free. And that's being distracted by the details, or being lost in the game, as I would say. Sawaki Roshi says that we lose sight of the whole. And in a couple of minutes, I would like to talk about what Sawaki Roshi probably means when he says the whole. Let me do another 2 or 3 quotes. "Actually, studying used to mean gaining insight into life. But now it's turned into just getting qualifications for a job." And that probably goes for studying at school, college, university. Why do people go to college or university? Oh, so in the hope that they get a good job and they get better pay later in their life. Dogen Zenji famously says, to study the Buddha way means to study yourself. To study yourself means to forget yourself. But few people think about studying in this way. And maybe some people who have never been to Japan don't know that. If you have to Japan and practice in a monastery, maybe you know that. It's the same about Buddhist practice today in Japan. Why do people go to the monastery? 90% of the monks that go to the monastery don't go there because they want to find some existential answer to the problem of their life, but to get a qualification as a Buddhist priest. They need a license. But why then, would you ask, do they want to become Buddhist priests in the first place? And the answer is they have been born into a Buddhist temple. Their father was a Buddhist priest, and they are expected to inherit the temple. They have no other choice. If they are the first son, the oldest son, the whole family, the whole parish expects them to become the new priest. So for them, practice doesn't mean that they try to solve the problem of life and death. They're also not looking for enlightenment. They need to go to the monastery for 1, 2, maybe 3 years to get their license. And if you go to such a monastery as a foreigner, the Japanese monks look surprised and say, well, but why? Why do you do this? You were not born in a temple. When you return to Germany or to America, wherever you go from, there are no Buddhist temples to inherit. Why would you want to practice 1, 2, 3 years, maybe even 10 years of your life in a monastery, even if you get the qualification, you can't do anything with the qualification. So Sawaki Roshi says, yeah, it's funny. It's funny that people have forgotten the source or the essence of practice or of studying. However much you accomplish in this life, in the end, you won't have anything to show for it. You will die naked. We are born naked, and well, when we die, maybe we wear clothes, and usually at the funeral, the corpse is dressed up. But who knows if we arrive at heaven's gates dressed in a suit, or if we arrive there naked. To my personal feeling, it feels more natural to imagine that we will die the same way that we were born. We will die naked. When the game ends, we can't take any points over to the other shore, whatever the other shore looks like. When the game ends, all of these points that you collected, they don't count. And I think, I don't know, Buddhism is not about making preferences, but I could imagine that for many people, these Sawaki quotes that I talk about bi-weekly are much more easy to relate to than the precious mirror samadhi that I talk about during the other weeks. So I talked about the precious mirror samadhi last week. I will talk about it next week again. The precious mirror samadhi, even for myself, often is really difficult. It's hard to grasp what the author really wants to tell us. While in the case of Sawaki, it's very easy. But I think the two are connected. And so today I want to talk a little bit about the connection. Sawaki Roshi is very easy to relate to because he also talks about delusion a lot, the deluded life that we live daily. While the old texts, they focus more on the enlightenment aspect, which is also important, but sometimes it feels a little bit, well, out of touch with our daily lives. So where's the connection between what Sawaki Roshi says here and the precious mirror samadhi? Let me return to one of the very first quotes in this book. On page 5, Sawaki Roshi says, all living beings live out their own unsurpassable identity. Each person can only live out their own life. How can it be that everyone has lost sight of that? And that's, I think, what he means when today he says that people forget about the whole. They only see the details. They forget about the whole. So we lose sight of the fact that each one of us is living their own unsurpassable identity, which is a translation of Tenjo Tenge Yuiga Dokson in Japanese, which means in heavens and below the heavens, there's nobody that surpasses me. There's nobody there who's greater than me. And people say that the Buddha said that before he became the Buddha, when he was still a baby. When he was still a baby, he walked 7 steps and said, in the whole world, my own identity is unsurpassable. And Buddhism was criticized also in Japan sometimes by other religions, saying that the Buddha is pretty, how do you say, full of himself to claim that. But Sawaki Roshi says here, that's not only true for the Buddha. Each single one of us is living this unsurpassable identity. It's just that most of the time maybe all of the time, we forget that. And Sawaki Roshi here continues at the beginning of this book. Our society lacks good examples, people who follow so-called common sense and group thinking, and factionalism are only bad examples. And then another quote. During the Tokugawa era, the Confucians said Shakyamuni was so full of himself. So that's the people who criticized Buddhism. Shakyamuni was full of himself. He talked about his identity as unsurpassable in the entire cosmos. Tenjo Tenge Yuiga Dokson in Japanese. That was their misunderstanding. Not only Shakyamuni has an identity which is unsurpassable in the entire cosmos, every single one of us has an unsurpassable identity. We moan about it while all along we are carrying it around with us. To practice the way of Buddha means to manifest within yourself your own identity, which is unsurpassable in the entire universe. And what Sawaki Roshi talks about here as this own identity, which is unsurpassable, would be in the precious mirror samadhi, the absolute or the essential. Actually, there's only one such identity here and now. One such person that can claim to be unsurpassable. And that's the person who is listening to this voice in this moment, right now. But of course, that's true for each one of us. So if there's a dozen people right now here in this Zoom room, each single one of us can claim this for himself. So in a way, it's this one person meeting 12 other manifestations of the same person. And that in the precious mirror samadhi would be the second of the 5 ranks. It's the absolute in the relative, or it's the essential inside the contingent. All of us, we are contingent beings, having our own nationality, gender, different names, different faces, all of this that is relative, it's contingent. But at the same time, there's one aspect of us which is essential, that we are here and now a manifestation of the one consciousness, the only consciousness. And there's nothing beyond that. And that's what we usually lose sight of and get lost in the game. One aspect of the game is that usually to play the game, we must focus on the relative side, on the contingent side of things. We have to identify with the person that we see in the mirror and forget about the mirror in itself. We see the world in the mirror without seeing the mirror. But that alone doesn't make the game, how do you say, well, delusional. The problem starts by putting importance on one and only one person that we see in the mirror, namely the person that we identify with. You see in the mirror thousands of people, millions of people, but only one is important to you. And I think the reason why we do this, why we put special importance on this one person that we identify with, is unconsciously we have never forgotten the absolute truth. Unconsciously we know that we are special. Why am I special? Because in this precise moment, I'm the only person that can actually see and hear and taste and feel things. I'm the only one who can breathe in this moment. And of course, that's true for everybody on the relative level. But on the absolute level, it's true for only this one existence. But we mix them up when we play the game. We mix these two aspects up. We don't see the absolute in the relative or the relative in the absolute, but we attach absolute value to only one person in the relative world. While, of course, each single one in the relative world has the same absolute value. But when we forget that, that's when, well, the game becomes meaningful. I have to win. I need to collect points. I have to be the winner at the end of the game. And that's kind of the delusion that Sawaki Roshi talks here about. Rather than study, we only try to get a qualification. We forget that at the end of this life, we will die naked. We buy one suit in the hope of getting the second one for free, when in reality, we don't even need the first one. You don't need a suit for your funeral. Well, maybe you need a suit if you want to meet Trump and G.D. Vance, but most of us will never have the honor to meet President Trump, so you don't need a suit. I talked, as always, maybe a little too much, but if you have questions, things that you would like to share, you're welcome to do so. Either raise your hand or talk just like this. Anybody who wants to ask or share something? Nothing? No questions? Julian, please.
Speaking as someone who has tried to avoid wearing a suit all of his life, I salute you. I wondered, my question is, across all the time you've spent in Zazen thinking about these things, do you think your relationship between contingent you, contingent Muho, and the absolute consciousness has changed? Although I think you've just frozen possibly, or I've frozen.
I'm back now, but I was gone for 30 seconds or so. Can
Yes.
you repeat that once more?
Can you hear me now? Okay, you're right.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, across all the time that you've been engaged in thinking about these things, sitting Zazen, etc., do you think your relationship or your feeling about the relationship between your contingent Muho self and the absolute
Yes.
self has changed? Can you feel that has altered across time, that dynamic for you?
Has the relation changed? I'm not quite sure if we all agree on the contingent self and the absolute self, but while using the metaphor of that part of me that I see in the mirror and the other part that's doing the seeing. In my case, especially in my youth, I wasn't really interested in the contingent part of myself, like hairstyle, dressing in fancy clothes, stuff like that. I was really never interested in that. I was very much also an introvert, kind of. I was always kind of on the mirror side. And for me, Zen helped me to also become friends with my contingent part, to care about this person, this German 57-year-old guy who's living in Osaka right now. While for a lot of people it seems to be the opposite way. A lot of people that get into spirituality, they say for them it was opposite. They only identified with the person in the mirror, and they, through their spiritual practice, got a sense of this, but I'm the whole, I'm the mirror, and the whole universe is kind of reflected in the mirror. So for me it was a little bit opposite. That's why I sometimes react a little bit allergic when I get that especially kind of from Advaita, Vedanta, non-dual speakers talking about the relative side, if it was only an illusion, and if kind of getting into contact with this absolute aspect was kind of the whole thing. For me, it's kind of the opposite, kind of, it's, well, maybe not the opposite, but both ways are important. So for me, Zen, in my personal practice, was a lot about kind of getting friends with the person that you see in the mirror, and seeing, well, that's actually also me.
Mm.
That's also me. The guy who has maybe not shaved his beard for 3 days. When I was young, I wouldn't care. Well, that's not me in the first place. But now, okay, it makes a difference if I shave or not. So in this way, you could say, well, the relation changed. And of course, at the end of the day, you could also ask, is there relation, or I think sometimes it's helpful for the understanding to talk about relation here, and to make clear these two aspects, the relative and the absolute, the contingent and the essential. But probably a lot of us would agree that at the end of the day, actually, we're not really having a relationship so much as it's one coin. It's one coin.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, exactly. In that way, it's like the old mind-body duality. You know, essentially, it's not a relationship between
yes,
the two. It's just the same
yeah,
two sides of the
yeah,
coin. Yeah. No, thanks.
yeah.
That's a lovely answer. Thank you.
May I?
Yes,
May I?
please.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. First, what does it mean exactly studying yourself is forget about yourself? Does it mean that you forget about the relative aspect of yourself, or it's not exactly that? And the second question is why you use the word studying and not just practicing?
Okay, so you're referring to this famous sentence by Dogen: to study the Buddha way means to study the self. To study the self means to forget the self. Maybe your second question first. Why do we say study? Study kind of sounds very intellectual. So actually it would make more sense to say to practice, or kind of when we talk about the way, we don't study a way, we need to walk the way. Like, I thought about different alternatives to translate this. For example, to walk the Buddha way means to walk by yourself. But to walk by yourself means to forget yourself. Would be another opportunity, another possibility. Or in German, I use the word ergründen, to go to the ground, to kind of to really penetrate. To penetrate the Buddha way means to penetrate yourself. So I'm not so happy with the word study. It doesn't mean only mental study. It means to really to penetrate, to go into something deeply. And then your first question was, what is meant by to forget yourself? One easy explanation would be to really go deep into the Buddha way means to really get into deep contact with yourself. And this deep contact with yourself, that's kind of the mirror, the absolute side. And to really get into contact with your absolute self means to forget your relative self. That's an easy explanation, but as I told you, or as I told Julian just a couple of minutes ago, for me it was the opposite. For me, I was very attached to the mirror in the beginning, and then I realized, but I'm also the person in the mirror. I'm also this one person out of billions. So for me, to forget yourself doesn't not only mean to forget the relative part, it also means the absolute self. If we, because of our practice, become very attached to this absolute self, the muho without a name, without a face, without nationality, without a gender, that's my true self. That wouldn't be Zen. Let go of that too. So to forget yourself does, in my view, not only mean to forget the relative self, but first of all, maybe forget your absolute self, the essential self. Forget about the idea that I'm one with the universe. As long as you think that you're one with the universe, you're not really one with the universe, because the universe doesn't think I'm one. So forgetting yourself also means to forget about being one with the universe.
What word does Dogen use for study the self in the Chinese or Japanese?
Narao. Narao. And narao means to learn or to study. So it's not a complete mistranslation. It's actually a quite literal translation. But you could also say, for example, to get to know the Buddha way means to get to know yourself. To get to know yourself means to forget yourself. Or to use a more kind of physical thing, to really taste the Buddha way means to taste yourself, but to taste yourself, to need to forget yourself. Andre, please, Andre.
Yes, thank you. To study, I heard, is Latin, and it means in German, sich bemühen, sich anstrengen.
Yeah.
So making efforts like
Yes.
this.
Yes.
So this is maybe is this the same like the Japanese, what Dogen said, like making effort, anstrengen?
Not there's no direct how do you say connection between these two words, narao in Japanese and making an effort. For me, it has more something to do with immerse yourself into something. Immerse yourself. Or there's this famous saying that Dogen Zenji also uses in the Zuimonki. When you walk through mist, even though you don't realize it at once, you get wet. And this realization, oh, I'm wet, that happens in an instant. But you have to walk in the mist for a long time until you're so wet that you realize I'm wet. And kind of this, what is happening when you walk through the rain is you suck up this humidity. And for me, that has to do something with nalao. Probably it's kind of like, well, practice. LV, maybe is that the way you pronounce your name? He said maybe it would be better to use the word practice than study. Like, for example, you study karate, you study judo, you study any kind of martial arts, you study calligraphy, you study tea ceremony. It's not kind of that you learn all of that and then you practice it later, but you learn it by practice, you learn it by doing. You immerse in the practice, so to speak, like walking through mist. And at one point, it happens. You know how to do it. Your body knows how to move. So I think that's what he means here with studying the Buddha way, to immerse in the Buddha way, like you would walk through a dense fog.
I put on the chat a very funny drawing. Funny for me, I think.
Ah, thank you. Stanley was deeply disappointed when high in the Tibetan mountains he finally found his true self. Yeah. Anything else you would like to ask or share? Chris, you
I
have a
think my
question?
mom wanted to share something, but now she doesn't want to. How about, no, you didn't want to. It's okay. Never mind. Maybe next time.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything else you would like to share?
Christopher put me on the spot, as he often does. And so I was going to share, and then I hesitated. But I think that for me today, your explanation resonated very much with me on the absolute and the relative and playing the game. I appreciate that. Because the concepts, you know, trying to think like that and live like that and be like that, you have to be, it's still difficult to understand both at the same time. I mean, you can't think absolute and relative. For me, it's still as confusing, but today your explanation was much more clear to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Today I try to kind of bring this kind of quite complicated, but also very detailed and focused on enlightenment, kind of the relative and absolute aspect. The old text, the old Chinese text, together with this very up-to-date, easy to understand for us modern readers, Sawaki, but it's not maybe as clear. So I try to somehow make a connection there. And if it resonated with you, I'm quite happy about that, because often I have the feeling that, well, actually it's the same that I talk up to each week, but I have the feeling that one is maybe much more easy accessible, but then it's not clear how it relates to the stuff that I say during the other weeks. So I hope that it becomes maybe clearer with each week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, it's already 9:05 here in Japan. What time is it in America? It must be early in the morning. 6 o'clock or so?
Now it's 8.
It's 8. Okay. Good. I was worried if you got up at 5 or so to make it in time.
And 1 p.m. in France.
At noon, but it's not at night. It's noon. Yeah.
1 p.m.
Those who are coming from Europe, probably in 2 weeks, it will change to summertime in Europe, and I think in America it's even before that, but there's no summertime in Japan. So please be aware that it will change in Europe from 1 o'clock to 12 o'clock then.
Yeah.
Or is it the other way around? I think it's the other way
It's
around.
the other way. Yes.
Yeah,
It's the other way, yes.
right now it's 1 o'clock in France, but it will be 2 o'clock in 2 weeks or so. We will start at 1 and we will end at 2. So please be aware of that. Okay, so thank you for joining. If you like, let's see again next week when I will talk about the precious mirror samadhi and the 5 ranks again. Have a nice week. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Schwan, for hosting us. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great dreams, aren't they?